Tonight on Garbage Time Fantasy Football, it's time for Week 14 waivers. Next week, it's probably your playoff game, guys. It's time for Garbage Time. Guys, welcome into Garbage Time Fantasy Football tonight. I am running solo, the workhorse of the show. Joe here for Week 14 waivers. I hope everyone's doing good tonight, and if we have any questions in the comments so I can keep this shit flowing and keep this show flowing, feel free to ask them, and I'll answer them live on the show for you guys tonight. Like I said tonight, guys, I've got Week 14 waivers for you. I've got the daily news, and I've even got a special DFS lineup episode for you at the end, just because this is my episode and I'm going to do it the way I want it. So without further ado, guys, let's get into the news and let's see if I can get through this with you guys.
News updates.
And guys, if you like the show and are a regular, feel free to listen to the show anywhere you can find it. We are here on YouTube when I'm also not alone, on Spotify, Apple, Google, anywhere you listen to Spotify's, Tunein, Iheartradio. You can feel free to find us. Guys, I know you guys are feeling the pressure of Week 14 coming on upon you, so let me help you out with that, see if we can help get you into your playoffs next week. So in our first little bit of news tonight, David Njoku has COVID-19. and is expected to miss this week. I don't know that many players have actually been able to play the week that they've gotten COVID. So that gives Austin Hooper some interesting streaming upside for this week. So keep an eye on him going forward. Also, as we discussed yesterday, me and JJ, Keenan Allen is not expected to play this weekend unless he is able to clear. Like I said, not many players have cleared first week that they've had COVID. So that is going to make Jaylen Guyton a very interesting streaming option, which I will talk about in a little bit here when I get to the waiver portion of this episode. Also, according to Kyle Shanahan, Deebo Samuel is going to try to give it a go this weekend and play. That is very interesting considering they thought he was going to potentially miss 2 weeks. So obviously that's going to affect the workload of Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle going forward. So keep an eye on his outlooks later on this week, and maybe you can get him back to help him get you into your playoffs for this week. Ryan Fitzpatrick is also going out under the knife. He's going to be looking at a scope, and he's done for the year, so absolutely no outlook there and is no longer his team. He is going to be a free agent this year if he doesn't end up retiring. I'd like to see Fitzmagic back in the league next year, but, we'll see how that goes. Also, Elijah Mitchell is entering concussion protocol. This was kind of alluded to yesterday when we talked about it on the show. I thought he looked like he was a little bit wobbly coming off his injury in that game, and he has entered concussion protocol now. So that is going to be a very interesting situation for JaMycal Hasty specifically. Jeff Wilson's also in that backfield, but he was also hurt. So if JaMycal Hasty potentially becomes the number one running back for the 49ers in this backfield, he could be in for a big fantasy week, and he could help you win your game and potentially get you into the playoffs. So it's interesting to know he may actually be the number one running back option for a muddied running back waiver back potential for this week. So just keep an eye on him, and he is someone that could potentially get you through that week. Next, Texans GM said that he is not going to make any comments on David Culley's head coaching job for next year. Listen, he's on the hot seat. It's not really his fault. That roster was absolutely atrocious outside of Brandon Cooks. And he maybe end up being a one-and-done coach, which is really unfortunate. But honestly, sometimes there's not much you can do about it. Dalvin Cook did not practice Monday, so that timeline of him missing 2 weeks still looks to be on pace, unfortunately. But like I mentioned yesterday, I don't believe Alexander Mattison has fallen off at all, and the production in this running backfield has not fallen off either. So I think you're safe with Alexander Mattison going forward, and I want Dalvin Cook to come back healthy if I happen to actually get farther into the playoffs. I don't think there's any drop-off between either one of these guys going forward. So Alexander Mattison, keep running that ball, and hopefully you will until Dalvin Cook comes back. I don't want to see a split backfield. I don't want to see a hobbled Dalvin Cook on the field for fantasy football. And our next little bit of news, Chase Claypool and Big Ben did not practice Monday. So obviously something to look at going into a Thursday night game. But I believe both of these guys will play. And actually, like I said, I've got a surprise lineup for DFS captain style for that Thursday night game. And one of these players might be in it. So stay tuned for that. Also, Saints wide receiver Deontay Harris is suspended for 3 games because of a DWI that he had, I believe, earlier in the year. So that'll make for some interesting options when we go over the wide receiving group too, specifically Traquan Smith, who could be a decent potential add for waivers for you going into this week. And Falcons designated Hayden Hurst to return. I don't believe this is going to do anything for the tight end position there. Listen, they have Kyle Pitts there, who has had a disappointing rookie season after those 2 breakout games earlier in the year. Hayden Hurst, I don't think is going to break into any more catches or take away from any catches of Kyle Pitts going forward. So, guys, that is our daily news today, and I'm running through this pretty quick. This might be a pretty quick episode for you guys, but like I said, we got to get that information out to you, especially on a Tuesday when you're going into the playoffs. So let's just get into that, and I am now getting ready for the waiver wire. So let's do it, guys. All right, so obviously with the waiver wire, it is very important to start thinking about the playoffs. So look at the propensity of stacking these guys for next week and the week after that too. Start looking at the schedules going forward. You may need that immediate player to help you win this week, but if you are already secure in your playoff spot, it may be more advisable that you actually pick someone that's going to help you later on too for that bench spot. So there is a few questions with that with some of these players going forward. So first one I want to talk about here is Jaylen Guyton. So last week he had a 90-yard game. He looked like a big part of the Chargers offense. And with Keenan Allen potentially being out with COVID this week, he could have a very large part of that offense. So I think Jaylen Guyton is a very good potential pickup for you, especially if you need to win this week. Next person on this list, who I believe is also an interesting piece, but more of a long-term outlook, would be Davante Parker. He seems to be getting a rhythm with Tua Tagovailoa after coming back from injury this week too. I understand Jalen Waddle is a number 1 piece there, but Davante Parker is a veteran and could be a stable wide receiver for the second-year QB there. So I think when you're looking at these 2 players, specifically Guyton and Davante Parker, if you need the immediate win this week, I think I would take Jaylen Guyton because he's in a more high-volume offense that's going to score a lot more. Davante Parker, however, is going to be going up against a nicer schedule going forward too. So Davante Parker is also a nice, decent option for you on the waiver wire this week. Next on this list of wide receivers, I've got KJ Osborn listed. Listen, so there's more injuries to that wide receiving core. And KJ Osborn could be an important part of that going forward to this week. I understand that he's had a disappointing year up to this point after that impressive week 1, but KJ Osborn's going to get involved in that offense. They're going up against a sputtering Pittsburgh defense, so I think KJ Osborn could be a decent pickup for the week. Now, one I'm questioning just a little bit more here is Amon St. Brown. So he's a rookie for the Lions, came on a little bit last week and actually helped them get their first week against the Vikings last week. Congratulations, Lions. You know, you were owed one. So Amon St. Brown is an interesting piece. Maybe someone you could bench on, that you could throw on your bench going forward and see how he performs depending on what his schedule looks like. So potentially look at Amon St. Brown too for your lineups. Next, an interesting piece with Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Listen, he's the kind of guy that could give you a 100-yard week any given week, but that's the problem, is when is he going to have the 100-yard week? He has an excellent quarterback with Aaron Rodgers. They're coming off the bye. I believe they've got a decent matchup this week too. So Marquez Valdes-Scantling could still be on your waiver wire. So potentially go out there and look for him. He's someone that can help you win this week. So yeah, give him a shot. Next, we've got Donovan Peoples-Jones. Listen, that whole Browns wide receiving core is banged up. That offense, well, I know not producing very well last week. needs to throw this ball to someone. And Donovan Peoples-Jones has had his moments this year. He's not my favorite option on the wide receiving waiver wire this week, but he's a decent option you can look at. So there's nothing wrong with potentially looking at him and seeing the news on him this week. So potentially consider Donovan Peoples-Jones this week. Next on this list, someone that seems to be very unlikely to be on your waiver wire. He's owned in a large majority of leagues, but Van Jefferson. Take a look to see if he's still out there. He's still available in some leagues. He's had a consistent 2 weeks now. He scored a touchdown, had nearly 50 yards this week too. He's a big part of that Rams offense and has slid into the wide receiver 2 spot. Odell could overtake him in the long term of the season, but don't get it stricken here, guys. Don't give up on the name there. Odell currently is a number 3, and I trust Van Jefferson more. He's got more experience in this offense. He's on the field for over 90% of the carries, and he's the deep target. I really believe Van Jefferson could be a very good target going forward. Next is someone that seems to only find water in the desert every once in a while, and currently is someone that I don't look to add to my roster, and I'm not looking to add to my roster. But listen, he's coming off a 100-yard game, over 100 yards. I believe it was closer to 120. Russel Gage, who is just being forced into the number 1 wide receiver spot for the Falcons. I picked him up a few weeks ago, and he literally gave me close to a goose egg. So do what you want with Russell Gage, but I don't believe I'm going to be adding him to my roster. He's got a decent matchup this week, but Russell Gage is someone else that you could look at on the waiver wire. And as I had already mentioned to you guys too, Tre'Quan Smith is an interesting option for the Saints too, especially with that suspension to Harris. He is someone that is hot and cold, good some weeks, not so good other weeks. So he's more of a flex option for you should you be a little bit desperate too. And let me give you one more wide receiver here too. Jamison Crowder, who now falls into the wide receiver 2 spot for the New York Jets. He's a wily veteran, plays out of the slot typically, but Corey Davis just got hurt. He's out for the season. So with him falling into the number 2 slot, he got a lot of looks last week. I believe he caught 6 targets, if I remember right. So, yeah, potentially wide receiver 3 numbers coming up for him. Elijah Moore, been an excellent wide receiver since week 8, the number 2 wide receiver on the year since that point. So I've got no problem with those two going forward. And I hope to see Jamison Crowder finish out and have a strong year for the Jets. Now let's move on to the running back position. There's a few Texans running backs that may be an afterthought considering actually these are Titans running backs who may be an afterthought considering the Titans were on bye last week, but both of these guys had 100-yard games. Dontrell Hilliard is an interesting option because he seems to be a back that catches the ball a lot too, and I think they're going to use him in screens this week. So Dontrell Hilliard, as I stated, had over a 100-yard game last week, 2 weeks ago. So he is a decent option. Consider looking at him going forward. I think he's honestly going to be the number 1 option there for the Titans. And also Devontae Foreman, who had a 100-yard game too, but I think he's going to fall more into that second role behind Hilliard. So I would put Hilliard up as your top option if you were looking at one of these Titans running backs, and next Devontae Foreman. And as much as it might pain you guys, there's also someone that the Titans cut recently who was picked up by the Seahawks that may be a desperate option for you, but someone you can use. His name is Adrian Peterson. Now, listen, I understand he didn't have a lot of carries last week, but he got targets in the red zone, and they are going up against the Texans this week. And is there nobody worse that gives up so many points like the Texans? Adrian Peterson is another emergency running back that you could potentially play this week. Is he someone I would want to play? No, I think there's much better options. But guess what? The running backs may be drying up, and he's maybe someone that you need to consider. So Adrian Peterson is also out there if you need to add him this week. Next up is Kenneth Gainwell. As I've stated before, I am not a big fan of this Eagles backfield because guess what? You like Kenneth Gainwell one week, you like Miles Sanders another week, then they've got Howard. Injuries across the board here. Sanders is hurt now. So is it going to be a Kenneth Gainwell week? Who the hell knows? You really don't know what you're going to get from this team from week to week. So if you can avoid this shitty committee, as I like to call it, I would try to avoid it and look elsewhere. The one where I would take a shot is the next running back here, and I already mentioned him earlier, is JaMycal Hasty. Listen, JaMycal Hasty needs a little bit of an avenue to get to that starting role with the 49ers. But Jeff Wilson is hurt. and Elijah Mitchell is going to concussion protocol. It's not out of the question that Jeff Wilson won't play this weekend, but should JaMycal Hasty draw the start this weekend, he is in a very prolific Kyle Shanahan offense and could be in for a very good week for you, potentially putting up running back 2 numbers. So I believe the number 1 pickup on the week is JaMycal Hasty. So consider him going forward. And as disgusting as it is, like we said, there's not a lot at running back this week too. So you may have to consider Tevin Coleman. I understand he starts the Jets, and that offense running the ball hasn't looked potentially great, but he's a starter. So, it's better to have some points than none points. And some of these guys might give you no points this week. Now, let's move on to the tight end position. Ricky Seals-Jones is a very interesting add, and I think someone that you could actually flex if you are hurt at other positions on your fantasy football team. He drops right back into that Washington football team's starting tight end position due to injuries, and it's someone that you could add. Maybe get you somewhere between 11 to 15 points if he had a good week. So I don't think he's a bad flex, and he's a very good back of the end starting tight end for you. So consider him as one of your 2 best options at tight end. The other option here is Tyler Conklin. Tyler Conklin is going to get a lot more targets due to that injury to Adam Thielen. Thielen was their red zone guy, but with Thielen going out, we saw Tyler Conklin getting those looks in the red zone. So he could be in line for that touchdown on Thursday night. So consider Tyler Conklin. I really think it's a coin flip here between these 2 tight ends, which one could have the better week. I don't think you're wrong going with either one of these. Next on the list is Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet is someone that's a little bit lower on this list. He's only owned in less than 10% of leagues. But listen, he's getting more involved in that Bears offense due to the wide receiver options falling off now. So Cole Kmet is someone that you can look at. You may not trust him, but like we said, the tight end position has been an absolute mess this year. So Cole Kmet could get in the end zone this week. Just hope that Jimmy Graham doesn't steal that touchdown again. Next up, Jared Cook. Like we said, Keenan Allen is probably going to be out for this week. So they're obviously going to have to spread the ball around a little bit more too. And that is a high-scoring offense too. So typically when you look at a tight end, you want to look for someone that is in a high-volume offense and the ball gets thrown a lot. That offense throws that ball around the field everywhere. So potentially Jared Cook could get in the end zone this week. So if you're desperate at tight end, you could consider him. And next, James O'Shaughnessy. Yes, I understand that tight end group and that whole team has been a big disappointment on offense. But they do throw it to the tight end position, and in an Urban Meyer offense does throw to it. He does get looks, and they have a much easier defense to go up against this week. So you could potentially consider James O'Shaughnessy this week. Plus, he's just got a damn cool name and someone you could throw into your lineup, I guess. Not that really matters for fantasy football or anything. Next, there are some interesting names at quarterback. And the number 1 interesting name this week is Taysom Hill, who JJ would argue is not a quarterback at all. Taysom Hill, even with 4 interceptions last week, in a lot of formats, scored over 28 points. And the reason why he did that is because he can run the ball. He's just a freak athlete. They're going to get him in a lot of options. I understand he's got that finger injury going forward, but listen, if you can run the ball at the quarterback position, you can play well in fantasy football. So he's someone I think worth blowing your fab on if you have anything left over and potentially need to use him in Superflex leagues. So if he's available in your Superflex league, play him. He has 10 to 15 range potential for the quarterback position. Next up, there's Tyler Heinicke, who is going up against Dallas this week. Dallas, I understand, has played a lot better at the quarterback position, but like as we stated earlier, a lot of these positions are starting to dry up. Taylor Heinicke is a starting quarterback here. He does rush into the end zone sometimes. Not a bad passing quarterback. So consider Taylor Heinicke this week going up against Dallas. There has been weeks where they have actually given up large numbers to the quarterback. Not as of late, but, sometimes you have to call your shot, and this is a divisional game. So maybe you get that weird outlook. And for my last quarterback tonight, I've got Big Ben. So listen, he's going up against another secondary that's middle of the road here. Big Ben is coming off 2 pretty good games. One against Baltimore last week where he had a very good outlook. So he's got good wide receivers. He's not my favorite starting option here, and hopefully you can look in other places. But, break the glass in an emergency kind of situation here. Consider starting Big Ben if you need to. So he's the third guy you can look at on your waiver wires. Lastly, guys, let's get into the defenses this week because there are some very decent options out there. First off, I'd like to talk about the Titans going up against the Jags. This Urban Meyer offense is an absolute piece of shit. There's no reason you can't start this Titans offense with confidence. So consider them as one of your top two defensive streamers of the week. The other one being the Chargers against the Giants, who I think are widely less available. But listen, they're on their third quarterback of the year. God knows what that offense is going to do. That Chargers defense is opportunistic. I believe that they're going to get some turnovers in that game, and they're going to hold that Giants offense to a very low score. So I think the Chargers are a very good play this week. And lastly, you got to play anyone that goes up against Houston. And Seattle is on a lot of waiver wires, so consider Seattle against Houston this week on the waiver wire. So, guys, hopefully that is informative for you going towards your playoffs. And like I said, this is a very quick show. And if you'd like to leave us voicemail, guys, feel free to do that at www.garbagetimeff.com, where if any of these takes are wrong, feel free to scream at us. We will be more than happy to play it live on the show and react to it. Absolutely no problem with that. And as I already stated to you guys, I've got a little special treat for you here, considering I'm at the end of my very short show. Let's do a DFS lightning round for you. So typically we talk about DraftKings lineups on the Thursday show, and typically I'm not just talking to myself when I do this, but considering this is my special show tonight and you guys are spending it with me, let's do a Thursday night captain edition of a DFS lineup. So in this DFS lineup, obviously it's for DraftKings. It would be a $50,000 budget, and your captain is typically going to be more expensive than your other players. So 6-player lineup. So the game for Thursday night is the Vikings against the Steelers. These are two defenses that have given up a lot of points, and there could be a lot of points scored in this game. And there's also decent weapons on both sides of the ball. So to win any money in this lineup, I'm looking to differentiate just a little bit. So everyone's going to go with those typicals like Najee Harris, Deontay Johnson, and obviously Justin Jefferson, who I believe is going to be the number one captain option. So like I said, I want to differentiate a little bit. So for my captain of this team at a cost of $14,700, I decided to go with Alexander Mattison for the only reason that he messed around last week and was able to get 90 yards rushing, and he also catches the ball. He is a do-it-all kind of back, so I think he could get a lot of passing work in this game, and I want to differentiate my lineup from other people. So my captain for this Thursday matchup is Alexander Mattison, again at $14,700. Next, I'm gonna have to bring in some firepower for this game, and Justin Jefferson is going to be way too expensive for me. I understand he's going to be probably the number one option for everyone to pick up in this game, but like I said, I'm going to differentiate my lineup from other ones, hoping to win big money in this. So I went with Deontay Johnson at $10,200, the other number one in this game. Listen, he's going up against Minnesota, questionable defense, so he's my number two option here. Next, I went a little bit cheaper. I went with the Vikings defense, who I'm hoping will get a turnover or two in this game. Not completely shut down Pittsburgh because I need some of these players to do well, but get a turnover or two for me. I might have a chance, and it'll also differentiate my team. So Vikings defense at $4,400. Next, I went with one of the quarterbacks because I typically like to play at least one quarterback in a captain DFS lineup. So I went with Captain Kirk Cousins, $10,400, and he has quietly had an absolutely fantastic year where people aren't talking about him. He's thrown for under 4 picks and absolutely lighting it up. He may honestly have one of the best seasons of a Vikings quarterback that I've ever seen, and it is completely going under the radar. So people need to stop disrespecting Kirk Cousins because he has had an absolutely fantastic year, and the Vikings have done a fantastic job giving him good weapons. So we'll see if he has a good week going forward. Next, I went with kicker Greg Joseph because I believe that the Vikings are going to score higher in this game and actually end up winning this game. So let's get a little bit of differences in there, and Greg Joseph is the one that'll end up rounding out my lineup. So again, guys, I went with Captain Kirk. I've also got like I said, Captain Kirk, Greg Joseph, Vikings defense, Deontay Johnson, and Alexander Mattison. I might be missing one here, so let me take a look for you guys. Tyler Conklin is also in the lineup as $6,200. So I also mentioned him earlier on this show. I believe he's going to get red zone targets, and you have to differentiate somewhere. So not everyone likes playing a tight end, and him getting in the red zone could potentially help me win money. So that is the hope that he will help me and you win some money. So guys, tune into Garbage Time Fantasy Football on Thursday, where we will give you the weekend preview. Hopefully more of the guys will be back for you, and hopefully this waiver show was at least a little bit informative to you. Like this episode, subscribe to the show, help this workhorse out. Hopefully some of the other guys will be back Thursday. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple, Google, obviously here at YouTube, Tunein, Iheartradio. You can also leave us comments on our Instagram, Garbage Time Fantasy Football. We also have a Twitter for Garbage Time Fantasy Football. JJ will give that name to you on Thursday if he's back. We also have a great website, like I've already mentioned, www.garbagetimeff.com. And Ryan also does an MMA show, and they've got some big lineups coming for that. That show is Garbage Time Presents the MMA Podcast. So give that show a listen. He can definitely help you win some money in that field of expertise, one that I am definitely lacking in. So guys, thank you for joining me tonight. It was a little bit hard for me talking to myself tonight, but I think we made it through it pretty well. And with that, guys, have a good night and win your matchups this week.